Most people in this room are pretty familiar with the impacts of aquaculture, or are very opposed to it, and as well we should be. I'd like to spend some time, for those who are not familiar with the impacts on wild Atlantic salmon, just going through for you what our concerns are, and they are many. I'm going to start off with where we are. Nova Scotia is in a bit of a rough shape right now with regards to wild Atlantic salmon populations. This is a map produced by COSAWIC, the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada. It's a group of scientists that determine salmon populations and grade them as to where they are with regards to healthy status. Along the eastern shore and south shore of Nova Scotia, and along the eastern shore of Cape Breton Island. Those areas have been designated as endangered. To counteract that, on the north shore of Nova Scotia, the populations are quite healthy. And in fact, in 2011, we had some of the highest returns and since records were taken in the mid-80s. The Margaree River, for example, achieved over 500% of the fish it requires to meet spawning escape minimum. We saw modest increases on rivers like the LaHave. We hear reports anecdotally because they're closed, but we hear reports from people beyond the rivers such as the Gold, the St. Mary's, and the West, that they've seen more fish in those areas than they have in previous years. So despite what we hear from the politicians, despite what we hear from the Premier, these fish aren't extinct. There's no reason for us not to work hard to try to save them and bring them back. You can also note on this map here, there's a bright yellow spot on the south coast of Newfoundland. Newfoundland runs have been historic. I mean, to quote some Newfoundlanders, you will walk across the river on their backs, except for the south coast. And guess what's on the south coast?
What?
A large aquaculture operation in Bay of Spear. All rivers, including rivers on the south coast, by the way, those rivers have seen increases in populations everywhere except Common River, which continues to be low, and that's right at the head of the bay where the majority of the aquaculture operations take place. You can draw your own conclusions. So what are we doing as NGOs? What is ASF, NSSA, and all its affiliates doing to try to change this population? Populations are low, but they're still there, and we're committed to making sure that these fish not only survive, but prosper. So escapes do and will happen. So what's the problem with escapes? Genetic interaction, interbreeding, and the causal loss of local adaptations. And ASF researchers have found that inbreeding between wild salmon and aquaculture salmon has reduced some genetic markers, one specific to coloration for camouflage of the juveniles. If you make your living trying to hide from a predator by blending in with the rocks on the bottom, if your camouflage changes, you suddenly stick out. They might as well paint a target on you. A recent study from Ireland reports that these negative effects are seen for several generations. So not only are the offspring of those matings affected, but several generations down the road are also affected. So it's not going to clear itself very quickly. And you have a large number of fish, 230,000 hatchery or aquaculture fish escape, running into rivers. There's competition for space with the wild fish that are there. So there's a problem with escapes. So open net pen aquaculture provides an awesome medium for sea lice to grow and multiply. I mean, sea lice and salmon have coexisted for eons. It's when you put thousands and thousands of fish in a closed area and sea lice affected, or infected, those lice have a chance to explode in population numbers. And then, because there's more lice than there are fish or in the cage, they can expand outside and affect anything swimming by. There's some important points to know from the science. Wild salmon are almost 2 times more likely to survive when they're not affected by sea lice. It takes as few as 8 sea lice to kill the wild Atlantic salmon smoke. So you run through a gauntlet of a cloud of sea lice as a smoke trying to survive, your chances can be pretty slim. This last point is very important. Acid stress salmon are more vulnerable to sea lice. Why is that important to us? Here's a map of Nova Scotia showing the southern upland. The southern upland is the most heavily impacted area, as you heard before, by acidification. So the fish, the smolts that are in there, the few that remain that are in there, are still affected by acid rain. They're weakened, and now they're going to leave those rivers to go to the ocean, and they're going to run right by cages. This area also happens to be the area that the province has identified in bright green as being the most favorable for aquaculture growth. What's the solution? Closed containment. We're firm believers that closed containment is the only way that we can travel, either closed containment on land or in closed systems floating in the ocean, as we're seeing out in BC with the agri-marine project. We need for them to be biosecure, a barrier between cage fish and the wild fish. ASF has joined forces with the Conservation Fund Freshwater Institute and providing resources to help them improve closed containment techniques and ability to grow salmon. We're very pleased so far with the results. So far, there's been no escapes, disease, or parasite transfer to wild stock, the big three. Fish are healthy, they grow very quickly.